Hi, I'm Rachel. I am a consultant for CEH's Built Environment Program and the host of today's webinar. This talk will center on solutions that each of our speakers and their organizations have to offer around identifying and selecting healthy flooring products. This conversation stems from the findings from CEH's recent Cradle to Gate research into the carbon and toxic footprint of luxury vinyl flooring. If you would like to dive into the technical details of the work, please visit our website where you can find the report. You can also view a technical or purchaser-focused fact sheet, or you can watch our previous webinar on this subject, which we did in partnership with Healthy Materials Lab as part of their Fall of Plastic series last year. After our presentation, we will have time for moderated Q&A. So please submit your questions through the Zoom Q&A function, and we will do our best to get to them all. And this webinar is being recorded, as I said, and we will post it as well as the slides after the webinar within a couple of days. So now I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. I'm so excited to have them here today. So first, Leila Behjat. Leila is an architect and senior researcher in design and practice at the Parsons Healthy Materials Lab in New York City. She is a creative solution finder with a high sense for design and aesthetic and has worked globally in the fields of interior and lighting design on both residential and commercial projects. In recent years, she has focused on renovation with healthy building materials. Her current role deepens her motivation to contribute to creating spaces that are healthier and joyful to humans and the planet as well. And next, I'll introduce Sequoia Hunter-Sujet. Sequoia is a culture cultivator with the unique ability to breathe the narrative into any design, giving voice to community, people, and places. Sequoia is the vice president at Determined by Design, an interior design group with the mission to design to change lives and represent communities' greatest strengths, history, culture, and diversity by advocating for design equity. So every person's value is uplifted by the spaces they inhabit. Sequoia is the first Native American to graduate from Moore's MFA program and one of the only Native Americans in the country to hold an MFA in interior design. Anjanette Green, the Senior Director of Product Transformation at the Healthy Building Network, was excited to speak to you all today, but she had a last-minute issue arise. However, in her place, we are joined by her wonderful colleague, Teresa McGrath, who is the Chief Research Officer at the Healthy Building Network and leads their research and education strategies. Teresa brings a wealth of holistic knowledge and multi-sector experience, including leading the chemical management program for Sherwin-Williams, serving as the senior managing toxicologist at NSF International's green chemistry programs, and working at the Environmental Protection Agency in the Design for the Environment branch of the Office of Pollution Prevention and Toxics. So we have a great group today. So thank you all for being here, and I'm going to hand it over to Leila.
Thank you, Rachel. It's really great to be here together again, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Healthy Materials Lab was established in 2015 at Parsons School of Design in New York to make human and environmental health pivotal in all design decisions, foremost in affordable housing. Next, please. And that is because we need buildings to promote health, not prevent it. Obviously, a university context allows for learning and experimenting. And one of those experiments was a collaboration within Parsons where we renovated our own small office space to test design principles that minimize toxics in the interior. And then for a renovation of Parsons Dean's office, we collaborated with a university alumni and chose materials that avoid VOCs, minimize plastic components, and avoid adhesives by designing the built-ins for disassembly. And then this here is a kind of more radical project. It was a collaboration with a community partner in Pennsylvania to create a healthy, affordable prototype for future development. And the hemp lime mix that you see here produces breathable, highly insulated walls, and by that also avoids polymers, flame retardants, and formaldehyde. And the interior material palette avoids or drastically minimizes petrochemically based flooring, paint, and finishes, and decreases off-gassing. The question obviously is, why are we so eager to change design practice? It's, in our point of view, because spaces, and particularly affordable housing, are built or renovated with cheaper toxic materials that break down and can affect the health of humans and the planet. And more often than not, they are very hard to repair. Moreover, most products are made from petrochemicals that contain harmful chemicals. Next one, please. We used to build differently. Over time, though, new technologies made our shelters more weather and pest resistant, and materials became, quote unquote, more efficient with the help of synthetics. Next one, please. And then the so-called legacy chemicals like lead and asbestos are early precursors to the host of toxic synthetic chemicals that we now introduce into our spaces. And then with the chemical age, just prior to World War II, we saw a surge in man-made synthetic chemically based products and additives. Next, please. These numbers here, they show us in majority, these chemicals are, we're just one before, please. Thank you. So these numbers here show that these chemicals were not tested, and by that are basically unpredictable to human health. So 86,000 chemicals kind of overshadow the number of chemicals that are tested or restricted. And most of these toxic chemicals were grandfathered in the 70s under the Toxic Substances Control Act. Next, please. At the same time, the Exposome project, a kind of relatively new scientific research, identifies that genetics determines only 10% of human diseases, with the environment triggering the other 90% of diseases. Next one, please. And so we see, like food, materials impact us. Next one, please. Today in America, we are the first generation to spend 90% of our time indoors. Next. And what we make our interior spaces with brings a lot of invisible things into our spaces, like flame retardants, fluorinated stain treatments, formaldehyde, and plastic, aka acrylic paints. Next one, please. These substances fall apart over time, they naturally do, and these particles get released in different ways into the interior. Next one. They are then available to enter the human body through normal breathing, ingestion, or through one's skin. Next. And once these chemicals are set free in our spaces, they can then put those most vulnerable or exposed at greater risk. Next. So, in summary, a great percentage of our common building products are made of chemicals that harm humans and the planet. And again, they're also not tested. Next one, please. Within these common building products, there's flooring, and LVT flooring tile has become ubiquitous. And as you see here, it composes of a variety of materials. Next. in our work at the lab, in order to find better alternatives, we take a close look at what the product is made of and what role the substances play in the product. The goal is to find a product that checks the box, including health. Next, please. So we aim for example, for better compositions, as many of the ingredients are silently making us sick. Phthalates is one of them, which are used to make plastics such as LVT flexible. They are endocrine disruptors and can cause allergies, asthma, and malfunctions in the reproductive organs. Next one, please. One phenomenon is manufacturers often advertise their products as being healthier for the user. But even if that were true, what about everyone else that comes into contact with the product along its entire life cycle? Next, please. Plastic is made from fossil fuel, and everything about making plastics is emissions intense. Next, please. So what do alternatives look like? Of course, the market offers better vinyl options that avoid some of the chemicals. In our point of view, the best vinyl is no vinyl. Next. And so we look for and aim at testing options that are made from, for example, wood or stone, brick, or here made from flooring made from hemp, or a healthier natural carpet option. Or, oh, sorry, we are 2 slides behind. I think it's lagging. Yes, thank you. Or, as you see here, we consider a polished concrete using a healthier floor finish instead of a flooring product altogether. And Sequoia and I I think we'll have a conversation about that as we've had in the past. Next one, please. We also ask how it will be installed and what best practices avoiding adhesives could be. Next. So for example, a click tile in a floating floor, or on the right-hand side, this cabinetry was joined together with nails and screws instead of adhesives would be an option. Next one. Our learning is constantly evolving, as you might have seen, as we're testing and experimenting, and by that learning. And so by that then are our resources. And I invite you to check it out under healthymaterialslab.org. And with that, I thank you very much.
So as a designer and educator who leads an extraordinary team of designers at Determined by Design, I'm always working towards deepening my team's knowledge base so they can think critically about design and address dilemmas within context to histories, people, places, and space. As a firm that centers our work around providing equitable design services to vulnerable communities, shifting from vinyl flooring to healthier solutions is more complicated for the communities that we serve. And so that's why in this section, I'm going to talk about why vinyl flooring and sort of the disconnect and the dilemma and how context matters. Next slide, please. Many affordable housing projects were built under a minimalist style and theory, which strips down design to its core function using limited materials in their pure forms, and avoids excess ornamentation to achieve a pure form of elegance. Minimalism was adapted from the minimalist art movement, which focuses on reducing the subject matter to geometric shapes, focusing on the most essential elements: clarity, monochromatic surfaces, repetition, and simplicity of form, eliminating the narrative and the human subjects. What we often fail to recognize is this design style has also eliminated humanity from design for vulnerable populations. So we've got 3 images up here, and we're going to go through what these images are. But first, let's identify some of the characteristics of these hard finishes, these grids, these monolithic floors. There's a bit of lack of ornamentation. One could also say there's a simplicity and limited colors and clean lines. So next slide. The first image is a school. And so we see the hard finishes, the grids, and the haphazard use of color, the blue. Next slide. The next is a corridor in a New York City public housing project. Again, same materials, same grid lines, haphazard use of the colors with the blue. And next slide. And this is also a prison. This is actually a Rikers, and these are the same materials. So we're looking at a school, a housing project, and a prison. And we're seeing the application of the same finishes. Next slide. So here we're kind of doing the same thing. The first I'll give you is a New York City housing project, and it's a common corridor. So this is, you walk up this elevator, and this is the corridor you go down to get into your unit. Next slide. Again, we have a corridor view of Rikers. And next slide. And then we have a luxury apartment hotel that is on the Lower East Side. There are terms sort of that talk about, next slide, the overall look and feel of this building as being classically gritty, that there was an intent to pay homage to the masonry and the stucco of tenement buildings and the tenement buildings in the neighborhood. The painted cinder block, next slide, and the grid formations were considered rusticated masonry details. And this is where we sort of start to find the part of the disconnect. But there's a really interesting factor in this particular project. While it glorifies a poverty aesthetic, there's a very simple material that's used in this that warms it up. And that's wood. Next slide. So wood instantly adds warmth and natural light to an interior, which has made the LBT conversation a bit problematic. So next slide. So as we look into sort of one of the original corridor views, and again, this is a New York City public housing corridor, we were, next slide. We were asked to sort of re-examine a proposed design for this corridor. And our team immediately said, okay, here is this blue, right? There's this blue that's prominent in prisons and public schools, and is already prominent in other public housing. It's a color that's going to be, that's the community is already going to associate with where they are, and it's not going to elevate their experience. So what we did was a quick overlay, Photoshop overlay. Next slide. Where we introduced green and we introduced a wood tone. Next slide. And creating a palette that's warmer, that's friendlier, sort of instantly changes, right? It's much more relatable to the luxury apartment hotel than it is to public housing. So what we've discovered and what's difficult is that healthier materials are still being displayed in a context of luxury and Western culture. Next slide. So this is affordable. We have quarry tiles, we have VCT that are in bedrooms and kitchens and throughout. And this is very common in the affordable housing projects because VCT was durable, it was easy to clean, and these were all factors in the longevity that was required for affordable housing. So when we start to look at the context of healthier materials, it was always just displayed in relationship to luxury. So here we have a sort of similar flooring. One is a healthy, one is the standard VCT, which is vinyl composite tile that we find in affordable housing. It's not an easy switch for us to take one flooring visually and change it to another one that is a healthier material, but still has the same connotation. Next slide. So this again is sort of looking at like a simple quarry tile in a context of a luxury space where there's height, there's air, there's light, and these are all elements where a minimalist aesthetic fails to provide a level of warmth to a lot of these properties. And next slide. It was so interesting for us to unearth where, so here we have full-on sort of luxury parquet floors. And these are in a residential and 2 hospitality settings that these are applied. And what we came across in one of our sidewalks, next slide, is that there was a resident who spent the time to get a peel and stick tile to run over the VCT so that they had the look and the feel of wood in their apartment, because there was an association to that feeling. Next slide. Warm and elevated and humane. So we always sort of come to this where we are on strict budgets and we are really trying to give a big impact. So we struggle with not using LVT. When, next slide, we question whether healthy materials are a privilege. When a LVT is $1.50 and a non-PVC flooring is $3.50. So for our developers, this is also why they choose to use LVT. Now, next slide. For us in defining sort of our practice of design equity, it's a creative, empathic, and concept-based design approach to provide equitable design outcomes for Black, Indigenous, and other minority people and communities. And when having to make decisions about why we use LVT, we take into consideration the understanding that there is a poverty aesthetic that we have to fight against to offer an elevated experience, which is what design equity provides. And therefore, when we are making decisions while we are taking into consideration the context of why LVT, and Leila and I will get into this later, sort of why LVT is really a horrendous product for us to use and specify. We have a conflict that we're constantly trying to resolve from looking at vulnerable communities who have grown up with a specific aesthetic that most of healthy materials are provided in patterns and finishes that are too closely associated to what they view as that connects them to levels of vulnerability and poverty. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sequoia. So I'm going to talk a bit about the findings from our research into quantifying carbon dioxide emissions and toxic chemicals used in the manufacturing of LVT. I'm going to go somewhat quickly and not into too deep detail because really this is meant to be solutions oriented, and we're going to focus on that, but you'll learn a bit and then you can read our report for more. So in 2012, the flooring companies in the United States announced that they were launching a new product called LVT. And as you can see, it's grown in popularity substantially since then, spurred on by HGTV, savvy marketing, and an appealing aesthetic, a low purchase price. And this demand drove an increase in manufacturing to China. And today, PVC flooring made in China is the most common flooring sold in the United States, accounting for over a quarter of all flooring sold here. And over the past decade, these shipments to the US have, as you can see, increased by 300%, exceeding 5 billion square feet imported per year, which is an astounding number. And this is happening even simultaneous to a demand for transparency around the environmental performance of these products. So vinyl is a plastic known for decades to cause many environmental health problems, especially related to chemicals of concern. However, over the past few years, we noticed that flooring manufacturers were marketing LVT as being environmentally friendly and healthy for families and for buildings. And simultaneously to this growth in LVT's popularity, as I was mentioning, purchasers and architects and designers were all demanding this transparency in building material, in the building material industry. And one vehicle toward transparency in the building materials industry is called an Environmental Product Declaration, or EPD. These declarations are creations of the industry and are built from life cycle analyses and other self-reported or industry aggregated data. And as mounting demand for LVT continued, CEH wondered, is LVT any less harmful to people and the environment than previous versions of vinyl flooring? And are these EPDs telling us the whole story? So we partnered with AutoCase and Materials Research to find out. And while I will be focusing on our findings specifically related to carbon and toxics of LVT, we believe this is a harbinger of all vinyl products and likely the pervasive problem of petrochemicals and fossil fuel-based plastics. So EPDs are complex, and they're only as good as the rules that dictate their development, the underlying data, and their ability to be applied during the material selection process. So this is really a challenge for all disclosure tools and all certifications is what is the underlying data. Flooring industry EPDs, which are shown here, are calculated using the US supply chain as a baseline. And as I mentioned before, most LVT is coming from China, despite the majority being manufactured abroad, where ingredients are different. Additionally, the life cycle assessments that underlay the production stage, which is circled here, of flooring EPDs have significant gaps and the data is outdated. The EPD certification body, NSF, has product category rules for flooring EPDs that are substantially outdated, and the standard data sets on which those analyses are performed are also outdated. It is impossible to tell from the LCA for PVC flooring what stages and inputs of the critical raw material extraction phase are being considered. Additionally, the LCA does not provide an accounting of carbon emission equivalents released for specific stages of production. And thus, it's not possible to critically understand the quality of the foundational data behind the flooring industry's declarations. So CEH wanted to uncover as many aspects of the extraction and chemical and material manufacturing of LVT as possible to tell the true story of the product. And as you can see in these two examples of LVT EPDs, the reader is led to believe that LVT components start with the materials such as PVC. So you can see the component is PVC. But what is the footprint of all the steps to manufacture PVC? And that's what we researched, which is this stage of production called the cradle to gate and transportation to site stage for two plants, one in Ingleside, Texas, and one in Yiban, China. So one of the key findings of the research was that fossil fuels are both an ingredient and a power source to making PVC. And vinyl chloride monomer is a critical building block of PVC. And to make that vinyl chloride monomer, VCM, in the United States, manufacturers use ethylene, which is a natural gas, as a feedstock. So it's not just a power source, it's a feedstock. And to make VCM in China, coal is used as a feedstock. So when our research performed their cradle gate calculations for these two plants, as you can see, the carbon emission equivalents were underreported by 27% for US manufacturing and by 171% for Chinese manufacturing. So despite LVT being heavily marketed to commercial and residential consumers as healthy and environmentally responsible, the production of this flooring emits carbon dioxide that previously reported, more than previously reported, and importantly, it uses and generates toxic chemicals and byproducts. Dangerous substances like asbestos, mercury, and PFAS chemicals are essential inputs in the production of vinyl flooring. While we mainly focus on these three toxics that are used in the initial steps of production, at every phase of the vinyl flooring life cycle, from raw materials to disposal, vinyl flooring both uses and generates toxics that harm the environment and threaten public health. Our demand for LVT in the United States drives environmental harm both locally in places like the Gulf states and abroad in places like China. And this pollution does not stop at geopolitical borders. So I'll share a little bit about these three chemicals that we focused on: asbestos, PFAS, and mercury. First, asbestos. So despite many people believing asbestos is outlawed in the United States because of how dangerous the substance is, asbestos use in the chloroalkali production is the last remaining legal use of asbestos in the US, and all asbestos imported here is being used to make this critical component of vinyl flooring. So the US imports hundreds of tons of asbestos per year in the production of chlorine, and the asbestos is mined in either Brazil or Russia, where there are documented adverse health effects for the local population. Asbestos is used as a filter, and over time these filters are degraded and need to be replaced. And the old filters are thrown away in landfills nearby manufacturing where wind can blow the asbestos fibers. PFAS, the use of asbestos filters, like in the US production process, is fairly old technology that is increasingly being replaced with the use of PFAS chemicals called Nephion. They are sprayed on membranes used to separate brine into chlorine gas and caustic soda. Nephion is known to be extremely toxic at low levels, down to the parts per trillion. These membranes have to be regenerated over time, requiring more PFAS sprayed onto the membranes, where workers inhale the compound. And a recent study authored by Healthy Building Network, where Teresa, and we will have Teresa speaking soon, they report a shocking blood serum levels of Nephion byproduct in residents living downstream from a Nephion manufacturing plant in Wilmington, North Carolina. And finally, mercury. Mercury is added to catalyze the reaction between chlorine and coal, generating toxic release of gaseous mercury. It's well known for all of its negative health effects, and it's being used in the Chinese manufacturing process. And of course, while we did not directly measure the harm caused by exposure to the toxics used in the vinyl flooring production, we do know that LVT thrives in the wealth gap and exploitation of people and environmental resources. I've talked a lot about that, but the impact of LVT on human lives is unfortunately not limited to toxic exposures and increased climate change burden. A recent study out of Sheffield Hallam University exposed that in China, LVT is manufactured using forced labor. The report, you can find out more here, but it uncovers that about 10% of the world's PVC is manufactured in the Uyghur region of China, and that PVC is mostly used for the building materials that are flooring and pipes. The Chinese government has directed local and regional government agencies to ensure that every single ethnic minority person of working age in the region is assigned to jobs. And the government agents go door to door and harass people until they finally move into the factory to work. People do not have the right to refuse these state-sponsored labor transfers, which experts say meet all international definitions of forced labor. Anyone who refuses a government assistance program like the job placements can be considered a terrorist and sent to an internment camp or prison. And where is it all going? Well, as you can see, it's ending up in Home Depot, Shaw, Armstrong, Mohawk products. So we are receiving these products made from forced labor, in addition to having the toxic and carbon burden. So we must move away from this harmful flooring, and Teresa is going to share more about HBN solutions for sourcing alternatives to LVT.
Thank you, Rachel. So Rachel did a wonderful job of describing the real environmental and human health impacts associated with vinyl production. And then we heard from Sequoia about the challenges of finding alternatives. So my talk today is focused on solutions to healthier product selection through materials modeling. Next slide. Healthy Building Network is a nonprofit organization where we research, develop tools, and broadly speaking, advocate for a built environment that is free of toxic chemicals. Next slide. And to give you a sense of urgency, if you haven't already gotten one from the previous speakers, according to the UN Global Status Report, the world is projected to add 2.5 trillion square feet of buildings by 2060. This is an area equal to the entire current global building stock. And with vinyl and many other hazardous materials used in building materials, this can either devastate people and the planet, or we can demand a safe and circular product economy. So the time is now to make informed material choices. And Informed is our HBN's preemptive modeling tool that reveals material health ranking. And I know what you're thinking. This is not yet another certification or eco-label. Instead, it's a tool that is a simple way to find safer materials. It drives accountability and elevates action. And with HBN's over 20 years of experience researching building materials, we deeply understand the impacts associated with them. We define a healthier building material as one that's healthier at all life cycle stages. So this includes hazardous chemicals used during raw material extraction, manufacturing, installation, use, and end of life. We translate this knowledge into our product guidance. So the example here is insulation. This guidance ranks product types within the product category of insulation, for example, from red, which is to be avoided, to green relative to others in that same category. Now, some of the biggest gains from a material health perspective come from avoiding the product types in the red zone. We encourage project teams to prefer product types that are ranked yellow and above, but any movement up the spectrum is cause for celebration. We currently have product guidance in 13 product categories, so most recently adding water pipes, roofing, waterproofing categories to the list. And vinyl shows up in many of these categories. Flooring, water pipes, and roofing, for example, all have product types that are primarily or entirely made out of PVC. And because the previous discussion was on EPDs, which are a measure of the embodied carbon of materials, I wanted to show how our guidance aligns with embodied carbon optimization efforts. So generally speaking, product types that are optimized for material health also tend to be low in embodied carbon compared to other product types. For example, on the left, we have our flooring material health guidance. Products that are preferred from a material health perspective tend to be either mineral-based or plant-based materials. Similarly, on the left, there's a ranking of flooring materials based on embodied carbon impacts. And we showed that maybe this information is flawed from the CEH research, but relatively speaking, wood, linoleum, cork, they're all plant-based materials and all typically have the lowest embodied carbon of all flooring materials. On the next, thank you. HBN's informed process sets you up for early success by streamlining guidance through all phases of design. But we should be modeling materials the same way we model for energy and carbon. Waiting until the design development phase to make product decisions is far too late in the design process to be looking at product attributes. We need to be learning from our own industry that is emphasizing and sometimes mandating building modeling to ensure improved building performance. So in this example, you know your building will need flooring of some sort. Maybe you know that you want a resilient flooring. There's a variety of choices within the resilient flooring options to choose from that have a variety of health impacts, with vinyl flooring at the bottom for the reasons discussed by Rachel earlier. Using materials modeling, you can see that choosing a linoleum flooring, for example, would be the best choice from a materials health perspective. But you can also see that there are several other choices that are higher on the spectrum than vinyl to choose from. And here's an example of a report that can be generated where we baseline projects based on a simple review of specifications. So project teams can see visually how they're doing and clearly see opportunities for improvement. So this particular report was generated for a large project, over 200,000 square feet, where we reviewed nearly 300 products over 18 product categories. Because we were not reliant on manufacturer disclosures or product certifications, we were able to complete this entire assessment in a small fraction of the time it would take to review specific manufacturer products. We then identified low-hanging fruit opportunities for improvement and the potential for impact, the potential impact that change would have on a material health of the entire project. For example, by simply specifying alkyl phenol-free paint, which is readily available and cost neutral, a project team can avoid hundreds to thousands of pounds of endocrine disrupting chemicals per project. Similarly, by avoiding PVC project types wherever possible across all product categories and choosing a product type higher on the spectrum, project teams can be confident they are choosing a less impactful product. The informed preemptive materials modeling helps point project teams in the right direction. This means project teams avoid product types that are worst in class and choose product types that set them up for success. And this is where the biggest gains are made towards safer materials. It does not, however, give guidance at the specific manufacturer product level. There are a whole host of helpful eco-labels and certifications that can be used after this informed process to help project teams refine those choices and choose specific manufacturer products that meet their need. We encourage teams to continue to ask for product disclosures such as health product declarations, to encourage transparency in the marketplace. But it's important to note that this informed process can help project teams optimize material health with or without these eco-labels. And finally, I just wanted to land on the idea that this informed process shifts powers to the users. So it really shifts the power dynamic. Manufacturers are currently driving the sustainability conversation. With informed, we can take that power back and create drivers to move the entire market towards safer solutions. So we can stop asking, for example, what is the best vinyl flooring product, and think big picture about what the best flooring solution is for a project. And this allows real impact and real scale of solutions. So the biggest improvements I mentioned earlier are made from moving away from the red zone. And if we're able to screen the entire market, we can shift the entire market towards safer, safer, healthier options with these simple, accessible data points. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and please feel free to find more information on our website, healthybuilding.net, or reach out to me at tmcgrath@healthybuilding.net. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. And I'm going to do just a very quick plug for some of CEH's solutions and tools, mostly centered on purchasers. So for you purchasers out there who might not get into those deep decisions that Teresa brought up, these are some great tools that you can find from the Center for Environmental Health. And now I'm going to hand it over to Leila and Sequoia for a conversation around this topic, and then we'll open it up for the questions that have come in through the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, Sequoia, I'll just start. I'm really great we get to talk. We've, DBD and HML have been working together over the past 1.5 years. It was a fantastic opportunity to, I'll say, mutually learn, particularly learn from your work. And so, as we had discussed, there's a few questions that, we feel like we would like to discuss together. And so if I can, I'd like to ask you, can you walk us through the process of how DBD sets priorities in a project and how then material health became a priority as well?
Thanks, Leila. So we have a pretty intricate stages of development when we start a project, in which we do a pretty deep dive into the history of the land, the site, the neighborhood, and the community, because these are all different facets. And we end up creating these sort of concept statements that really are these poems and these prayers and these intentions of wellness to the communities that we serve. When we started to sort of have this engagement of trying to understand, we want to have materials that are safe. When we started to do the training and understand how destructive LVT as a material is, we really had to sort of say, this is long-term housing for vulnerable communities who already are underserved. And we are trying to sort of give them these elevated, beautiful homes to live in these beautiful spaces and not feel underlooked, because we feel as though design is for everyone. And but having to sort of adjust our focus when it came to materiality, and understanding that now, not for every project, but we had to make it a priority to say, we cannot sort of just be the design that we're constantly battling against, which is purely aesthetics and style, but we actually have to take more responsibility and ensuring that we're putting safe product into these homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because you're just making me realize that we came from two sides, which I think can be seen as a benefit. We're all architects, designers, and we kind of tackled this task from two sides. What you helped us learn was the aesthetical part, that a product can be as healthy as it can be, as it wants to be, if it doesn't bring joy. And you mentioned a sense of elevation and appreciation it won't fly, I'll say, informally speaking. So in that, in this mutual learning, what are some milestones you think in that journey, and how has that impacted, for example, your team, you'd say?
So our the majority of our team has gone through the Healthy Materials Lab course. So we have integrated that as part of our onboarding for new team members, so that they get a baseline understanding. And so that has sort of shifted the way that we recenter our team's thinking about materials. I think one of our biggest sort of milestone is constantly sort of being informed and having to be activists all the time, and educators with our development partners, where it's a new, for them, it's a new material. These we know vinyl, we've put it everywhere, this, that, and the other, lasts forever. And we've had to adjust different ways of combating pro LVT. From a cost perspective, we're still working through with a lot of our development partners. From an install perspective with our GCs, where it's easy for us to also say, well, hey, LVT gained a lot of traction and popularity in just really the last 10 years. So how do we know? How do you know? Even though we understand, the destructive nature of the product itself, from how it's made and how it cannot be recycled or reincarnated into something useful. So we've really sort of made some strides, and also changing some of our design standards when our projects get priced, where we are putting in a healthier material flooring options into our projects. So off the bat, we're not sort of combating an allowance of $1.50 for flooring, which is pretty ridiculous. So we're making really informed decisions with each project.
Thank you. Rachel, I see you there. Do we have time for one more question, or should we open the space to the audience?
We have some great questions from the audience. I want to give them some time. And actually, Sequoia was just talking about one piece. So if Teresa, you'd come and join us. And so there's one question from the audience that in a large scale products, a lot of their clients already are married to LVT. So you were kind of just mentioning this, Sequoia. Can you walk through, and I'm opening this up to all three of you really, how to direct a large developer to revisit their existing design standards?
Okay, so one methodology is to show them something nicer. And I'm going to talk about some real product that we're actually using, and not all of these products have gone through. What's really amazing about Parsons Healthy Material Lab is it's a real strict scrutiny about is it safe for the people who make it, which is a bar above everything else. Now we've been using one of our sort of our product that we've been really enjoying is a product called New Wood. It's made out of wood pulp, and it can get cost competitive. One of the things that we do is that a lot of these smaller companies, it's not the big companies that are leading the charge. It is a lot of small independent companies that are on the market right now with no PVC product, and to present everyone with the deal that could be made is the conversation that you have to take. I've discovered that people who are dollars and cents are not going to want to hear, hey, we're literally killing the environment, and we are killing people and causing illness by using this product. They don't care. It's about dollars and cents. But saying, hey, you can have this exclusive product, you can be the first one on the market, this is a small company, they'll get down and dirty in terms of their pricing. That is an advantageous way to go around pursuing this.
I really like the idea of showing them the alternatives and starting there. That's a great one. And I think that also leads into another question. So I'm bringing a few questions together here. This might be for Teresa. What are some important considerations for concrete, carpet, and static dissipative, I think I'm saying that right, flooring? And I know one person was specifically asking why wool carpet was at the bottom with an asterisk.
Yeah, great question. So those are all, it's important to consider all of your options when you're choosing, your flooring materials. And when you're designing early in the process, so if you're needing, acoustical solution and you're trying to stay away from carpet, that you can build in other acoustical solutions into the design to help with that process. And so I think it is. That's a larger question probably than we have time to dig into in terms of digging into all the different characteristics. But some of the things that we pay attention to when we're looking for healthier materials is the base material. What is it made out of? How is it made? What are the human health and environmental concerns associated with that, as well as the top coat. So for flooring in particular, the top coat, whether it's on concrete, whether that's a sealer that might be used, or a stain treatment on a carpeting product, those top coats can be a big driver of material health to the user as well as the manufacturer. And to build on Sequoia's answer, I think another big tool to get people to switch is education, and education. So understanding the issues as well as showing the successes of peers. So showing where others have used a successful product and that it worked. And that makes a lot less scary to switch to other product types and to try something new.
Yeah, thank you. It's great. So we have a lot of questions. We're so sorry we're not going to be able to get to all of them today, but this was recorded and we will be posting the recording to CEH's website, as well as we will share the slides with everybody who registered for this webinar. So PDF of all the slides. One thing, so you'll be able to get in touch with all of us through finding us online. And we have one question, Sequoia. You mentioned a product that a lot of people are asking about. So that I think it was New Wood. Can you?
Oh,
yeah, eliminating them.
It's NUWUD. And they in terms of if you're looking for wood look. It's a great product. I mean, I would love it, and if some of the bigger manufacturers really just busted down the door with some really cool, like awesomely designed non-vinyl product, but that is seeming to not happen, and everything else, a lot of it looks like a VCT. It is not too attractive, and that's the conversation that Leila and I are constantly having.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have a number of questions in our last second just about embodied carbon. And so just again, how do we change this narrative, and what are, how do we keep investigating the challenges, but really moving past the challenges to solutions? So folks, please check out the research and the summary fact sheets from our research at ceh.org. And you can really see there's the question of what's the underlying data for a lot of these disclosures and certifications. And really, it's not a specific problem, let's say with EPDs. There's nothing nefarious about EPDs, but it's really what is the underlying data, and then how is the information being disclosed to developers, purchasers, and so on for decision making. And that's where this is complex, and really we're intending to open up a conversation to be asking the questions of EPD. Are EPDs telling the carbon story? Are they telling the whole carbon story? And how do we move to what's next in transparency and healthy purchasing and healthy materials? So we are at time. Thank you all for joining us, and you see all of our organizations represented here. You can find us, and we appreciate. Thank you to all of the speakers for being here and giving so much of your time and yourselves.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah.
Hosting, great.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye.
Bye.